And we are off. All right, so our last big kind of lesson here is this lesson on public opinion in the media. And I kind of put this in the end because, frankly, I thought it would be a topic that a lot of different people would have some perspectives to offer. I think when you say the media, holy cow, you are definitely hitting a button, man. People have very strong opinions on the media in America. And I think the best way to understand this is that um, most people believe that the importance of the public of the mass media is their ability to influence and even create this concept of public opinion. That's again, if we're talking, a lot of people, oh, the mass media sucks or the mass media is brainwashing. I really want to get an idea, specific conceptual definitions of what we're talking about. So when they say they're brainwashing us or they're putting out false news, fake news, whatever it is, what we're really saying is the mass media has an unfair or an unwanted impact on public opinion. Public opinion is a specific thing. It is the ideas and attitudes that most people hold about issues. Okay. And I say issues, and I put that little difference in there because it's not just politics. It's not just politics. Public opinion covers quite literally every major issue that we feel is part of our society. Damn, I'm just all messed up here. Everything from religion to what a marriage is to, it's not just about voting. It's not just about elected officials. But here's the key. Public opinion is like the thermometer for politics. If you want to get elected, you better understand public opinion. It's an essential component. Why can't I get this set? Oh, right. It's an essential component of everything we do. And so, in many ways, understanding public opinion is the place we have to start when we're talking about understanding mass media. So, where does public opinion come from? There are four general areas. And again, just a kind of a final exam alert. That is a perfect question for the final exam. Which one of these is not an
We
area?
can't see your slides. You're not
Oh, you
sharing your
can't.
screen.
I'm sorry.
No.
Why is it? All right, give me a second. We there?
Yes,
You
thank
guys
you.
got it now? Awesome. Sorry about that,
Okay.
guys.
That's okay.
Samantha, you have your hand up? Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna tell you that your slides
Oh.
weren't showing.
Okay. All right. So yeah, that public opinion little part down there, that's a perfect setup for a question on the final exam. And so when we say personal background, how does personal background affect your public opinion? Okay. And when I say your public opinion, this is kind of the strange part about it. Obviously, public opinion is the sum total of the group's position on the issue. So when we say public opinion in America, we're talking about all Americans. So when we say, where does public opinion come from? It's a question of how do each of us individually sort through the various public opinions to come to our opinion. In other words, what causes us to choose the path we're on? What causes us to be pro-Trump or anti-Trump, to be pro-abortion or I'm sorry, anti-abortion or pro-choice? What causes us to be what causes us to choose our genders, all these different things? That's all, at least the argument says, partially created by your background. Now, here's the second part, and this is the piece that gets a lot of people kind of frustrated with the mass media. Depending on who you are and how you think about the mass media, some people say that the mass media is quite literally the primary source of public opinion. Other people argue that mass media only has as much impact as we allow it to. There's a wide range, but most people say that mass media has a significant impact on public opinion. Although, in other words, a significant impact on how each of us individually view these issues, and then we start to come together. and aggregate around those issues, whether it's the pro-gun or anti-gun lobby. The argument is we get those initial ideas from the mass media. Now, what is mass media? And this is an important distinction. It is TV, radio, newspapers, magazines, anything with at least a national reach. Just because I'm sitting in my garage right now tapping away on my own blog doesn't mean I'm part of mass media. One of the problems with regards to technology is that lots of news sources that used to be considered fringe, me in my garage tapping away on my blog, can now suddenly become mass media. Quite literally, I take these videos. I had a couple weeks ago, I had to upload them to YouTube. If for some reason, I'm all right, maybe I shouldn't dream out loud. If suddenly 3 million people started watching my videos, I could potentially become a source of mass media, especially if the purpose of the videos was to try and affect people's perspectives or opinions on these issues. Is this making sense so far? Okay, I don't think I need to say a lot about the next one. It's very clear that public officials have an enormous impact on where we get public opinion. Now, this is an area where I'm going to open up the door to you guys, because I actually, the more I think about this, the more I think this is another category that I would kind of switch. And instead of saying public officials, what if I said famous people? I say that because obviously, not just candidates, but I mean, again, love them or hate them, man, Trump had an enormous influence on public opinion. I mean, here's the thing. Biden doesn't want to be Trump, except in one place. Biden, like every other president, wishes he had the sort of influence and impact on public opinion that Trump had. Does that make sense? Hey, you love him or hate him, man, you got to respect his ability to just, I mean, he could literally put out a tweet, 7 words, and public opinion needle would just sway all the way one. It was incredible, his ability to affect public opinion. The reason why I would broaden it from people like just political candidates or officials is because, not for nothing, people like Beyonce and Oprah and Jeff Bezos, and man, these cats are increasingly able to fundamentally alter not just what we know about an issue, but how we feel about that issue. That's my argument. What do you guys think?
I agree. Because there were some other celebrities. I remember like Pink, who's very anti-Trump, and can't remember the other ones, but they were publicly voicing their opinion about things, and they had they have a lot of following, so celebrities who voice their opinions are going to impact and have a either positive or negative outcome for their fans.
I think it also kind of ties in with the one of the aspects of why people don't vote or why people vote. A lot of people don't feel like their opinions matter, so they don't follow the politics at all, but they follow famous people and they follow music trends and movies and stuff like that. So they're more apt to their opinions and their beliefs than, just political candidates.
Yeah, I mean, I guess for me, the reason I put famous in there, and I know it sounds like so general, it's like, what's the point of even having a title? But I mean, man, right now, not for nothing, athletes have more of an impact on public opinion than I ever remember them having when I was growing up. That was one of the reasons why people like Michael Jordan and Tiger Woods stood out 20 years ago, is because they were this generation of athletes who on one level or another were all of a sudden affecting. And LeBron James, I think, took that to the next level in terms of his willingness to get involved and all sorts of issues that, frankly, frankly, people like Michael Jordan stayed away from. Derek Jeter, I grew up, I'm still a massive Yankees fan. Derek Jeter, I mean, he was as large a personality as you could get in New York. He never got involved with political issues. He went out of his way to not get involved. And so, to the point that there were other athletes who began to call him out because they felt like he should use his stage. I don't know if anybody's heard it. If you've got that stage, man, you should use it to make a stand. You should use it to. That's a real tension within the world of the the famous, and of course now being an old guy, I kind of chuckle at this idea of the social media influencer. Um, I, I I just laugh like, really, you're influencing me because you're carrying a certain purse or wearing certain shoes? That's okay. You've got 13 million viewers. Oh my God. Here I am teaching American government and I'm happy if I get 15, So it's amazing to me. I would love to say that this is ridiculous, but it's not. These people have an enormous impact on what we understand the issues to be and then what we think about those issues. That's public opinion. Go ahead, Selena.
So I agree with like that famous people have a big impact, especially LeBron, because he's really like well respected, I feel like. So a lot of like the things that he tries to like influence, usually I feel like a lot of people are behind him. And then I remember, I think it was like around the Black Lives Matter movement, like a lot of celebrities were like posting things and telling other celebrities to like post things because they have a big platform. So I feel like it just has a lot of power just because they're celebrities and
Yeah.
they were telling other influencers use your platform because it's powerful. I remember actually reading like posts about that.
Yeah. And he was the one, for instance, that pushed to get the athletes to be allowed to put things on their shoes. And so for me, I'll be honest, the moment when I realized how big an issue that is, I told you guys about teaching in China in 2013. I think I told you about that. And did I tell you the basketball court story when I went down the basketball court? I think I told you guys. Anyway, man, I needed a break, went down to the courts, and of course, everything that happens in the United States versus China, you just have to add some zeros. Instead of 60 people down the basketball courts, there were about 600. And so, no joke, I walked on the court and everything stopped. They saw a black guy on a basketball court. It was on. And the only word they knew was LeBron. And so I was LeBron until I took my first shot. And then they realized I wasn't LeBron. And so it was just like the only thing they understood about race in America as an issue was what they saw LeBron James do for 30 seconds on a TV. And that was amazing to me, considering, I mean, we all know that. I mean, just looking at the screens here, I mean, the idea of diversity in America is goes without saying. But for them, their concept, oh yeah, blacks, LeBron, good to go. You're really good at basketball, right? And so I just found it amazing because I never even considered the idea that, okay, yeah, LeBron has a huge impact of followers in America, but no, this is a global phenomenon. And to bring it back around, this is why people look at things like mass media, public officials. They're not just impacting our public opinion, they're literally impacting world opinion. You know, the last group that really plays a role here is the interest group. Okay, I hope you guys see how we're building a really interesting dynamic of issues in America, because all right, we could put mass media to the side, and I'm telling you now, there's a whole bunch of people that argue interest groups are the number one problem in America with regards to politics and public opinion, trying to brainwash people. Is this making sense? Like the idea that interest groups, I mean, their whole point is not just to let you know about animals or immigration or guns, or their point is to make sure you know their opinions on those issues. And hopefully you'll donate some money and follow along. I mean, they're a public opinion machine, very much so. That's the whole point, because they're not getting candidates into office. They're doing is lobbying and trying to get public opinion to weigh so heavily in their favor that you then call your senator and ask for a new law. That's the point of interest groups. So in many ways, a lot of people like to focus on mass media. I think interest groups play a pretty significant role in development of public opinion as well. Alita, go ahead.
About the athlete and what they think and how they express it, I think one person that did really good too was Kaepernick, when he started to kneel during the national anthem.
That is an
During
outstanding example. Outstanding example. And I mean, it's funny because before Trump, that was probably one of the more polarizing things in America in terms of the whole Kaepernick kneeling. Yeah, I have my own opinions on that I'll set to the side. It's just not really the class for it. But yeah, I think that's a great example. He really influenced, and I guess that's the reason why I think it's a good example, because it's not just about influencing a bunch of people to one position. You can quite literally have the exact opposite intended effect when you're trying to influence public opinion. As much as you're hoping you're going to move it over to here, there's going to be a significant number of people that develop their perspectives on the other side. That's American politics. For everyone on the left, there's one on the right. And the more I move you to the left, the more someone's going to move to the right. It's just the way America works. The saddest thing for me is that I feel like the only time we all ever see ourselves truly as one America is when somebody attacks us. And that's that's an unfortunate component of our society, but again, I digress. So how do we find out about public opinion? Well, it's this thing called the poll, the POLL, polls. Polls are the primary mechanism by which we measure public opinion. And up until, quite frankly, the 2016 election, the defeat of Hillary Clinton by Donald Trump, polls were a very important and highly respected component of the system for the most part. I'm not saying they were perfect. I'm not saying everybody loved them, but you did not see news coverage about an election anywhere without a series of polls. They used polls constantly to support their discussions and understandings and analysis of the election. So what types of polls are there? There's 4 types of polls, and you'll see this is actually pretty easy to remember, partially because I think their names tell you, and second, when I categorize them for you, you'll see it's pretty straight ahead. So the first 3 polls come before you vote: public opinion poll, tracking poll, entrance poll. Those all take place before you vote. Exit poll takes place after you vote. So that's the categorization. Public opinion, tracking, entrance all take place before you actually check that box. The exit poll takes place after you check the box. So you can think of the public opinion poll as a snapshot. It is a single picture. It is taken at a particular moment, and its goal is to try and predict some sort of aspect of the results of the election. What percentage of members of the union are going to vote Trump or Hillary? Take a poll, survey. And if anybody, quick little thing, the way this works is you have to have a certain number. You can't just poll like 7 people and call it legit. The best polls have anywhere from 1,500 to 3,500. You can't poll everybody. You can't ask everybody their opinion. And so the goal is to try and come up with what's called a population or a universe that you believe is representative. So I'll randomly call on the phone 1,500 Missourians and ask them what they think about COVID. Try and make it as random as possible. Literally no names, no genders, just whoever answers the phone, that's who I'm going to call. And you ask all these questions, you take their answers, you compare them with the other 1,499 people that picked up the phone. I have a poll. I have statistics and data that should give me some idea where people are leaning. Is this making sense so far? Okay. So the public opinion poll tends to focus on a specific moment or a specific issue, but it's a snapshot. The tracking poll is a movie. I'm going to give you a series of polls or surveys over time to see how your opinion changes. Does this make sense? These to me are more valuable because what they're doing is they're beginning to reflect the other variables I'm considering. How much is Trump's tweeting affecting his ability to get elected as we get closer to November? How much is Pelosi's leadership affecting people's perceptions of the investigation of the Capitol? These are tracking polls. I'll give you 3, 4, 5 polls over a period of time, and then I'll be able to kind of tell you how things have changed over time. Questions so far? Okay. An entrance poll is exactly what it sounds like. It is a survey I give you as you approach the polling area, the place where you're going to take your vote. So it's the picture. It's another picture like public opinion poll, but it's literally 5 minutes before you're going to vote. As long as I'm 100 yards away from the entrance, we're good. So this is where you'll get a lot of the major news agencies on election night. They'll have people standing right outside the doors giving you this poll. Questions so far? An exit poll is quite literally just the same person standing there when you come out after you've been, and they give you a different survey. That's all the exit poll is. But taken together, I hope you can see how polling in general is potentially quite valuable to identifying public opinion. And as much as we hate them, listen, we are using polls constantly to track everything from people's continued opinions on vaccines to their perceptions of the impact of COVID to, I mean, I happen to be living right now in ground zero for COVID. I think it was Missouri, Florida, and forget the other state, but there's Arkansas maybe. There's 3 states in the country that currently represent 40% of new infections daily, and I'm stuck in one of them. So I tell you, if you don't think public opinion matters, man, move to a different state from where you are. You'll see real quick. Public opinion matters. Why? Because public opinion then affects what the politicians do. They were elected to do the things the public asks them to do. And if they say, we don't like motorcycle helmets, guess what? Missouri has no motorcycle helmet law. That's the way it goes. Questions, thoughts so far? Okay. Sure, no questions? Go ahead, Selena. You're on mute.
Polls are just like surveys, right? Basically.
Yep, it's exactly what they are. It's exactly what they are. All right, so I'd like to think we've all heard of this term before. We're looking at those polls on TV. Margin of error. If has anyone never heard of this term before? Margin of error. Okay, so I take a poll. The poll comes out and says 47% of Americans are supportive of Biden. 47% of Americans like Joe Biden as president. Margin of error plus or minus 3%. And you go, margin of error plus or 3, what does that mean? Okay, when I take a poll, I have to lay out its specific guidelines. I'm going to give 1,500 people the survey. I'm going to do it during this time. I'm going to do it for this particular population. When you do a poll, it's not just Joe Blow standing on the corner handing out pieces of paper. You got to have a very clear set of questions. They're usually run through an entire group of people to assess whether or not they're biased. I mean, there's a lot of work that goes into a poll. Here's the thing. Sarah might forget to check box 7. Courtney might have kind of written a whole bunch of stuff into box 9, but I can't quite clearly read it. I can't count that. And so now all of a sudden, even though I have all of the data, there's certain numbers I can't quite count on. So I have to leave them out, or I have to make up some sort of gap. So maybe out of 1,500, there are 13 in which some of the answers are questionable. That's the margin of error. What I'm saying is the actual number of people that like Joe Biden is somewhere between 44% and 50%. But the most certainty I have is that 47. I just can't be 100% certain, because there might be things that I wasn't able to capture in that survey, or problems with the delivery of the survey where the actual number might be a little bit to one side or the other of that 47. That's the plus or minus 3%. Is this making sense?
So you said if they wrote something and they can't read it, that counts as a miscalculation. And then if they, like, say they checked the box, but they didn't check inside the box, but you don't know what box they checked.
That's exact.
Okay.
So not for nothing, right? The most simple poll that all of us do is a vote, right? And so that's why this same issue comes up in voting all the time. What box did they check? Is the X inside or is it outside? And that's why you'll get 2 and 3 reviews of voting processes to try and reduce the margin of error. Because if I have a vote and there's 13% of votes that I can't quite calculate, that's enough that I could say somebody won when they actually lost. 13% is a huge variation, right? If I add that onto my 47%, all of a sudden now I'm talking 34-60. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, let me just put this another way. You never, ever trust a poll with more than a 3% margin of error. Never trust a poll with more than 3%. Never trust a poll that doesn't have a margin of error. Okay, so I'll put it this way. When I was doing intelligence work, or at least teaching intelligence work, I wasn't a spy or anything, wish. When I was teaching intelligence work, one of the key lessons was the idea of when you get a CIA analysis or an NSA analysis, they never, ever give you numbers. They literally give you strongly confident, confident, marginally confident, somewhat confident, not confident. It's a category thing. Within that category, they then assign a number. So if I'm strongly confident,
Hey,
I
stop.
oh, I
Oh,
didn't
no,
do it.
no, don't kick me.
Is this that big boys
Stop.
wear pants moment? I'm wearing pants. All right. So the no one's seen that commercial. I'm sorry.
That was true.
So they don't give numbers like you'll never have 100% CIA report. They literally do not do that. The highest confidence level is strongly confident, and that represents about 95%. They always give room for the possibility that they didn't cover something. That's what they're doing here with the margin of error. They're just simply saying, this is where we think the number is, but in all honesty, it could be a couple points to the left or the right. Questions? Teaching you a lot about polls.
You just right.
I think this is the reason why I'm gonna show my age, but when they were in school with Scantrons, fill in the bubble.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's exactly it. Yeah.
Yep. And you know, I mean, it's right down to bad handwriting and that, I mean, and so then what you get, right? And so one of the things that a lot of it makes sense, well, let's try and move a lot of this voting to electronic form, because then everybody automatically hits the square, everybody, and so there's a lot of uniformity that you can develop. But then the question becomes, well, can it be manipulated? Is it secure? Can it be hacked? And there's always going to be distrust of process that you can't 100% see. Hey, Karen, can you mute your mic for me? Karen, can you hear me? Thank you. And so this is the academic attempt to create greater trust in polls. You can never 100% trust them, but if they can at least give you some parameters for where the mistakes were made, the theory is you'll at least be able to use that poll to have a little bit more of an idea of where things stand. So for instance, you know, Trump, you could argue over whether or not his exactly where his approval numbers were. But if you consider margin of error, even with margin of error, he never got above 42%. That statistically speaking, that's the reality. What that means, whether or not everybody was surveyed, you can always ask questions about the poll itself. But if you accept the numbers, that's what it means. So again, polls are one of those things. I think people love or hate polls as much as they love or hate Donald Trump, to be honest with you. Now, here's where we get into the foundations of public opinion. And ultimately, my goal here is to end up having you guys start to understand that whether you want to be or not, you really kind of fall on a certain area on this spectrum that I'm going to introduce in a minute here. So the concept you need to understand is political ideology. Political ideology. It is the sum total of your beliefs about politics. Your religious ideology is how you believe or what you believe about God and religion. Your political ideology is what you believe or think about politics. Ideology is your belief set. Now it needs to be very clear. Ideology is not philosophy. Philosophy is the search for knowledge or meaning. It is lots of questions. Philosophers annoy everybody because all philosophers do is talk about really high ideas and ask lots of questions. Ideology is the answer. I don't have to question belief in God. I just know it is. I don't have to question the power of prayer. I just believe it is. Ideology is belief. To put it simply, ideology, religion, philosophy, science, if that helps you guys at all. So the argument here is, yes, there's political philosophy. Many of us are willing to ask questions about what we believe about politics and, whether or not we trust this or that. But underlying that, we all have these unshakable beliefs about power, politics, the role of the government. Is this making sense so far? So yes, quite literally, I am making kind of an argument that we all have what's essentially a religious view of politics in America. That we have a deep-seated understanding of what it is before we even open our mouths and talk to others about politics. Does that make sense? Questions? Okay. So what are the ideologies? Well, first, as much as I have a list here, I'm going to immediately tell you this is not an either or choice thing. I need you, and I'm just going to go ahead now before I even get into it. You need to understand politics in America as a spectrum. You can fall anywhere on this spectrum. And yes, it goes all the way off to the right, all the way off to the left. The variety of different political viewpoints. Now, in America, we tend to have four main viewpoints. Now, another thing I want you to note, you do not see Democrat, Republican on here. That's political parties. Your ideology is your political view. Does this make sense so far? This is important to remember because never forget that up until the 1920s to 1960s, Republicans were the more liberal party in America, and Democrats were the more conservative party in America. So you have to remember liberalism and conservatism are fluid concepts. They are deeper issues for American political meaning and process than just that basic what party are you? Because frankly, your ideology is going to change a lot less than your political party. Does that make sense? You might change your church, you're not changing your belief in God. Does that make sense? Questions? Okay, liberalism. Now, as soon as I say this, I can't tell you enough how much it frustrates me that liberals and conservatives in America actually have their books switched. Like, so liberalism, and tell me if this sounds familiar. Liberalism is about individual rights above all, except in America. In America, liberalism tends to focus on a community understanding of identity and provision of the needs of that community by the government. I'll say it again. Liberalism in America tends to be predominantly focused on the concept of community identity and then the provision of the needs for that community by the government. Everybody with me so far? In most societies, in fact, every other society except America, liberalism is the promotion of individual liberty above community needs. That's the foundation of liberalism. I'll put it even more bluntly. The founding fathers were all liberal, every single one of them. The primary goal was the protection of individual liberty above the role of the government. That's liberalism. And they baked it into the Constitution and the Bill of Rights because they believed that that was the core of American values. And I agree with them. The problem is that we've confused some stuff over time. That's just my own opinion. Is everybody with me so far? Or am I confusing the heck out of you? We good?
I'm good. Yep, I'm good.
Good. Okay. Conservatism in America is about promotion of individual liberty above the rights of the government. Is everybody following this? I hope I cannot express enough how confusing it is to a lot of people. I'll be perfectly honest. I think the confusion of liberalism and conservatism in America is one of the primary causes of political conflict in America, because people on both sides end up arguing certain policy issues without understanding how it conflicts with their actual ideology. Does that make sense? Okay. Conservatism in America is about promoting and protecting individual liberties above the demands of a government. It's not anti-government by definition, but it does see government as a primary threat to liberty, and thus it should be, to a degree, limited. Conservatism in every other society is focused on limiting social development and progress within the society, and not limiting in the sense of automatically being racist, or that's not it. Just slowing it down, making sure that changes for labor laws or wages are slow and measured, so you don't end up with disruptions or civil wars or violence or riot. That is the worst fear of every conservative, at least in most other societies, is the idea of individuals and groups within society disrupting society's flow. That's why traditional conservatism believes in big government. Yes, I said that. Traditional conservative sees government as the primary source of limiting all these liberals running out and starting their own revolutions and working the people up for new laws. That's what it is in most other countries. And America conservatism is in fact about promoting individual liberty against the dominance of the state. Is anybody seeing the confusion, or am I just, what do you guys think? No one even wants to touch this one. Come on,
I'll
guys.
speak. I'm not necessarily confused because I'm one of those who really didn't understand the difference to begin with. So this is all just like helping me understand anyway.
The founding fathers, what makes conservatism make this kind of weird sort of switch is, ironically, the first true conservative fight in America, i.e., slowing social change, keeping tradition, that could be defined anyway. But for American conservatism, the first fight in that area, maintaining slavery. And because the government was the primary source of eliminating slavery and then reinforcing Reconstruction, American conservatism adopts an anti-government perspective. Even after racism is left behind for a group of conservatives. Not every conservative today is racist, just like not every liberal today is righteous. We need to get that out there. But conservatives today suffer from the reality that the first conservative fight for Americans was around slavery. And as soon as conservatives looked at the government as an ill, well, that left liberals for no other choice but to begin using government to make the changes they thought needed to be made. And that's how the two sides literally switched up their ideologies relative to what the most of the world understands them. You say right wing in Europe and people freak out. Is anybody familiar with European politics or anything like that? If you're right wing in Europe, that's a bad thing. Anybody know why? Because that's the National Socialism. That arrow on this page, if you go all the way over here, that's the Nazis. You go all the way over here, that's the communist and socialist revolutionaries. And so these concepts in European politics, for instance, mean something significantly then they something significantly different than what they mean for Americans. And so I'm just trying to highlight that from an ideological perspective, we're kind of different. Here's another one. Okay. So socialism. Socialism's left in most of the world. It's left here. What is socialism? So I told you in America, liberalism is about this at least trying to develop what they see as a community identity, and then believing that the government should, on some level, then work to provide the needs to that community. Okay. Socialists take it even a step further and basically say, no, the government should actually design and manage the community itself. The government should actually be dictating most of these rules and laws. That's the only way to really develop community. So in America, regardless of whatever the arguments are between liberals and conservatives, there's definitely some issues over socialism, and that goes all the way back to World War I and the development of communism, okay, which is a type of socialism. And so, ironically, even one of the things about politics in America today, has anybody heard of the progressives, the progressive element within the Democratic Party? Is anybody? Did everybody just go off to get cereal and stuff?
I've
or-
heard that term. I'm not really sure what it means.
The progressives, I would put progressives on this spectrum. So let's say we've got Democrats right here where the arrow is. Let's just call them the liberals in America, right? We put socialists all the way over here on the edge. They're way further left than your Democrats in America. Progressives would be right about this line. So they're not hardcore socialists. They're not your Cold War, neo-communists. But they're definitely a little bit more radical in terms of what they think the government should be doing for certain groups or certain communities. And so again, there are some of their perspectives that I just don't agree with. There are some of the things that I do. But in the end, for me, I've always approached this as just because I'm here on one issue doesn't mean I have to be here on all the issues. And there are some issues that I find myself very conservative on. But I don't think most Americans make that sort of distinction. If you're liberal on something, you're supposed to be liberal on everything. If you're conservative on something, you're supposed to be conservative on everything. And that's just not how I do it. But then again, I'm strange. All right. So socialists take that liberal perspective even further. Not only should there be some sort of community-based identity above the individual, but the government should definitely be a major player in developing and protecting and promoting that identity. That's that again, it's definitely a hard pill to swallow for conservatives. There's no doubt about that. But don't underestimate how much the current Democratic Party is struggling with how to incorporate some of those progressive or quasi-socialist perspectives into their platform. Questions? Any questions so far? Somebody raise their hand?
Yeah.
Go ahead,
Listen.
shoot.
You said for socialism, just because I didn't finish writing the rest of it, the government should design. What was the rest of that part? Because you started talking.
The government. All right. So for the liberals, right, the government should do whatever it can, or should be directly involved in providing for the groups and the communities. The socialists think they should directly manage those communities, create economic laws that really go out of their way to just force equality within a society. And that's why, not for nothing, a lot of socialist governments, especially during the Cold War and even to this day, from the outside, they look real like dictatorships, and totalitarian governments, because in the end, the government takes control of everything. See China, see North Korea. That's socialism at its core, is the idea that the government runs everything, at least in terms of managing the society. And that is just again, if you want to bring the liberals and conservatives in America into the same exact spot on that spectrum real quick, have us have a confrontation with a socialist society. It's an automatic. Now, here's the one area again where I kind of point out where things just are odd in America when it comes to ideologies. Libertarianism. Libertarians are actually in America right of conservatives. Okay. They are not fascist. Fascism is all the way at the end of the spectrum on the right, in the same way that socialist dictatorships are all the way at the spectrum on the left. Okay. So I'm not calling Democrats in America dictators. I'm not calling Republicans or conservatives Nazis. Please, please don't get me in trouble like that. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that they're all on a political spectrum, and that we move along that political spectrum based upon our ideology. Libertarians are on the right of the political spectrum in America. They're a little bit they're probably about the same space on the right that I would argue progressives are on the left right now. Is this making sense so far? Libertarians, does anybody know any libertarians? No? Libertarians take that stay out of my business and liberties to the next level. Minimal government, not just less government, not just a more effective, efficient, not just lower taxes. Libertarians think that ultimately the only thing government should be involved in is running the basic day-to-day stuff of the country, especially as it relates to international relations. Take care of taxes, take care of diplomacy, fight a war if we need to. Other than that, government should not be in your life at all. No one knows any libertarians. It's one of those, it's one of those ideologies that people don't understand. There are a lot of Americans who are libertarian. All right.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
so is it like those people that sometimes when they are billed with like a ticket, they want to argue about it, want to go to court, not pay?
Yeah, because you'll argue, hey, listen, the United States government only has limited jurisdiction. That jurisdiction is not over me. There are absolutely have been legal arguments throughout the entire existence of the United States that people have basically said, listen, the US government jurisdiction over me as an individual is limited. You do not have the right to do XYZ. It's there was actually a recent incident, I want to say Massachusetts. A cop went to go pull over a van full of guys, and like 13 militiamen jumped out. Is it anybody hear this story? And there was like they literally had to block off like this whole like an acre of this forest, and they had to get them all. They were all armed, and so it was a standoff. And finally, they got them to put down their arms and everything. But the whole catalyst for the situation was they belonged to a militia that believed that the United States government did not have jurisdiction over them, and that was the whole foundation of it. Again, those my wife loves watching those like Alone in Alaska kind of shows on Discovery Channel and stuff. A lot of those individuals are libertarian. They are actually taking it to the next step to say, not only do I not think that the United States government should have this sort of jurisdiction over me, I don't want that. I'm going to move as far away from that jurisdiction as I can. And so libertarianism is libertarianism. We hear a lot about the progressives because they are really vocal, and well, they need the government to achieve their agenda. And so the Ocasio Cortezes, they're going to always be vocal about their perspectives. Ironically, there are just as many libertarians, you just don't hear from them because their whole point is, I don't want nothing to do with y'all. This is my life. I live my life, you live yours. I don't have to be a part of this political system to be a member of the society. So it's a fascinating ideology. Questions? Alita.
Yes, does that apply to people that want to live off the grid?
I think most of them, when somewhere or another, fall into that libertarian category. Listen, to put it in perspective, so I was serving at a restaurant. I used to work at this rib joint in East Lansing, Michigan, actually. Man, I'm going way back now. And it happened to be the place where the Libertarian Party held their meeting every week. And so, as you can imagine, my smart ass mouth from New York could not keep shut whenever I was at the table and we'd start talking about stuff. And I got into an argument with the one guy. Yes, he was my customer, but what do I know? I'm not always the smartest guy. And it was all about, because to me, okay, so let's take it less. He's like, no, all drugs should be legalized. And he's not saying it like he's a big drug addict. He hates drugs. He just does not believe the government should in any way regulate personal behavior. And so whether it's drugs or any other issue, The government should not be involved in those daily laws and rules. And so his argument was drugs should be completely legal. And then individual choice, responsibility, culture, that's how we get rid of the drug problem. And I was like, well, what do you do when your daughter gets, addicted to heroin? And he's like, well, my daughter wouldn't get addicted to heroin. And I'm like, you're sure? And it just escalated from there. In other words, they are really focused predominantly on the concept of personal choice. And that personal choice isn't just something to be protected, it should be relied on. It should be the foundation of the American political system. Questions? Samantha, did you?
Because
I'm sorry, go ahead.
working at the airport, sometimes we see people coming in with IDs that do not belong to any state. It's like they belong to some kind of group, and they sometimes say they don't belong to any type of government and stuff. So those are the people that you consider as libertarian.
We can't hear you. Your mic stopped working again.
Is that all right?
Yep,
All
you're
right.
back.
Good looking. So and see, this is why, if you want to know the truth, to put this in perspective, guys, I personally actually don't even see politics as a spectrum. I see it as a circle. Holy cow. Nice to have spiders jump right down in front of my, not a big spider fan. I actually see the political spectrum as a political circle. And here's why. When we're talking about something like what you're referring to is, if I remember correctly, it's essentially an international citizenship. You simply reject the existence of state governments. You can come to that spot from the right, libertarians. Actually, the elimination of government as a concept is also a big part of the left. The ultimate goal of Marxism was to not have any government at all, because everybody has everything they need, and we all run around, we're all equal, we all have equal ownership, that's the idea. Ironically, communism's ultimate goal is idealism, this perfect world. And for them, it can only be achieved through this government control of everything, to the point that we don't even need government anymore because everything's equal. For the right, you come to that perfect government by not having that government at all. You're just relying on individual human beings and their natural tendencies to kind of balance what we understand to be society. And to me, what's ironic is talking about something like the international ID. I know conservatives that have pursued that route, because to them it gives them some sort of legal document, but they don't have to rely on like a passport or an American citizenship. But I also know that one guy in particular, Most Def, he was an actor, he was a rapper, and then he was an actor. He was in the movie, he was left there in the movie The Italian Job with Mark Wahlberg. It's one of my wife's favorite movies. He was the guy
Great
that was
movie.
right. I love that movie. He was the demolitions guy. Soon after he made that movie, he started having issues with the IRS, and so he actually reneged his U.S. citizenship, got an international document, and I believe he actually lives in South Africa. There's a couple of countries that actually recognize that, and so he moved to one of those countries, and that's where he lives today. That's why you've never seen him in another movie, is because he actually went that route. But he didn't go that route from the right. He wasn't a libertarian. He went that route from the left. And so that's why I kind of find it interesting to think of political spectrum almost as a circle. Questions so far?
I have a question.
Shoot.
I just want to make sure that I understand. So whenever you say libertarianism, that's on the right side. That's
Yes,
just like
in American
the extreme
politics.
of the extreme people. Like, I don't want to do anything with the government, right?
Right. And I wouldn't even necessarily, because to me, when I think extreme right, I think Hitler. And I'm talking all the way off the page to the right. And when I think extreme left, I think Stalin, all the way off the page to the left. But you have to keep in mind that that's all part of the same spectrum. So, for instance, when somebody on the left refers to Trump as Hitler, that's out of bounds. Why? Because you're taking this discussion way beyond what the right in America really represents. For the same way, that when people on the right call Obama a communist, that's out of bounds, man. That's way past the edge of the political spectrum that we're dealing with in America. Does that make sense so far? Questions? So here's Selena, go ahead.
Hold on, sorry. Couldn't get my thing on mute. So just re-verify. It says stay out of my business, and what was the last part of that? Because you
Reliance on
for
personal responsibility.
okay.
Yep, reliance on personal. We are all moral and intellectual enough to live our own lives. We do not need government giving us rules and laws. That's
Okay.
that's the bottom line. So obviously, I think this is a great slide considering how we got here. This is kind of a general overview of the conservative and liberal ideologies in America. And so, as much as my previous discussions about ideology might have confused you, the spectrum and the circle, blah, 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 this is a good slide for you to bring everything back together. Okay. First and foremost, liberals believe the government should play a significant role in improving the lives of all Americans. And if you're wondering the origins of that, you have to think Reconstruction, the New Deal. Do you guys remember the New Deal? Can we talk about that a little bit? How the United States came out of the Great Depression? Does anybody know anything about the New Deal? So Franklin Roosevelt passes this enormous number of laws in the 1930s. We're in the deep depression, 40% unemployment. I mean, horrendous. That's when the Democrats start to develop this idea that the government can step in to help individual Americans. He creates welfare. He creates Medicaid, Medicare. He creates unemployment insurance. That's the government stepping in. And the argument was it was the only way we were going to get out of the Great Depression. And luckily for him, World War II comes along. American industry reinvigorates. Looks like the New Deal saved everything. And that's why to this day, most Democrats don't necessarily have a problem with the government getting directly involved in all these programs and stuff. And it's also why conservatives do. Government should have a limited role in people's lives. To put another way, the government is there absolutely to take care of and maintain America. That's not what conservatives are saying. The conservative position is government shouldn't take the place of your own personal responsibility for what you need to do to be successful. So if you need welfare, well, then why aren't you working more? Why can't you ultimately develop your own responsibilities, your own abilities to limit the role of government in people's lives? Government shouldn't be that directly involved. Question so far? Okay, so when I say involved, what am I talking about? I'm talking about social programs that help everybody from the poor to the unemployed, to the elderly, to veterans, to discriminated against populations, to you name it. The role of the government is to provide programs that help those people. That's the liberal ideology. Conservative ideology, again, comes back the other way. Listen, conservatives don't have anything against the poor, the unemployed, elderly. Conservatives are not mean people, okay? And you need to understand for a lot of liberals that somehow want to cast all conservatives as evil or immoral, that's just not the case. The issue they have with those things is how much they're being used in place of the individual's ability to do those things. So, for instance, you will very, very rarely, if ever, see conservatives have problems with social programs that help the elderly, that help veterans, that help the disabled. Their issue tends to be with other groups that should be able to take care of themselves and yet are still getting significant social assistance. And why does that become a problem? Because when you talk government programs, you are talking about increased taxes. And essentially, when you're talking about increased taxes, You're talking about taking away what I need to then provide for my own responsibilities, i.e., my money. So, as a conservative, you are taking away from my ability the money I made to support me and mine to help other groups that I personally believe should actually be helping themselves. That's the conservative response to the social program. So, to put it another way, a lot of the times the conservative pushback on social programs has nothing to do with the actual groups being helped and everything to do with the amount of money it's going to take to give that help. Now, unfortunately for conservatives in America today, you also can't overlook the reality that in the past, they also resisted the provision of social programs based upon things like race, religion, and gender. And although that's not necessarily the case for many conservatives today still have to deal with the shadows and legacies of those aspects of conservatism in the past. In the same exact way that liberals are still trying to deal with the realities of the cost of social programs, the expansion of American government, and ultimately what many people believe to be the diffusion of American identity and what it means to be American. Because we're helping all these people individually, what about America? So I'll pause there because I just kind of summarized American politics in the last 5 years in about 5 minutes. Does this make sense? Am I hitting y'all with that thunderbolt of lightning knowledge? Little light bulbs going off? No?
It
Selena, go
makes
ahead.
sense to me.
So I'm gonna make a statement and see if if I'm understanding this correctly then. So like conservatives would be like against the fact that we're getting all these stimulus payments. Would that be okay? I just want to make sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And they're not against helping the sick. That's not what it is. The question is, how much are we going to spend on these programs relative to the potential impact of them? And if you can't prove to me X, Y, Z, why am I taking another $1.3 trillion of American taxpayer money to do this? Even the infrastructure bill, one of the main hangups on the infrastructure bill, and if you're not familiar, it's this massive spending bill that Biden's trying to get through Congress. And basically, the goal would be to distribute money for everything from new airports to fixing bridges to building new rail tracks. So, for instance, here in Missouri, one of the things that infrastructure money would be used for would be to build one of the country's first high-speed trains between Kansas City and St. Louis. That's the project online. And so that's the sort of thing the infrastructure money would go for. The conservative response is A, that's a whole heck of a lot of money. And B, why aren't individual states taking care of this? You should just, it shouldn't be a federal government thing. It shouldn't be more taxes thing. This should be something that the individuals who built the bridges or who are using the bridges or running the bridges, that's who should be paying for it, not some massive massive national tax burden.
And
Alita.
that's that conservative.
Sorry,
side.
go ahead, Sarah.
That's just the conservative side. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure that was
Right, because again, I can't stress, think spectrum. I'm just giving you broad overviews, right? So within that, there's lots of arguments about why there's some people that I don't care if the bridge falls down. I'm tired of paying taxes, blah, blah, blah. There are others who would say, okay, it should be limited, and then the state should decide how to deal with the money. And so there's all sorts of, I need to be clear about that. But generally speaking, they're against it because they believe that we should not be constantly using enormous sums of federal money for what essentially are localized issues and programs, whether it's localized to a group or a place. That's just not what they tend to be in favor for. Am I doing a good job being balanced here? I'm trying so hard to be balanced to make sure you guys understand both perspectives.
yes.
Okay.
I think I'm under conservatism a lot more with how you putting things.
I'm telling you, for me, I cannot stress this enough. I need to know the topic first. I am very liberal on some things. Heck, I'm even quasi-socialist on some things. And I am very conservative on some things. I am a law and order guy like you would not believe. To me, law and order is the base of everything we freaking do. And if we don't keep some sense of law and order in our country, we are doomed. That said, I'm not pro-gun. I think the government should in fact be the predominant source of authority and stability within a society. I'm old school conservative, like European conservative, which makes both people in America really not like me because I end up arguing things that both sides really find annoying. So, I mean, to me, I just want everyone to understand that there's no box that you have to check. You can slide along that spectrum. I would argue every one of you is going to slide across that spectrum as you grow older, as you raise your children, as you get different jobs, make more money, make less money. You're going to slide across that spectrum. Your opinions will kind of change. Questions so far?
I
So I'm
just
now
have a question
go
about that,
shoot. Go ahead.
the conservatism and then building the wall between the US and Mexico. Like, if they are against like paying more taxes to do like in fact build more infrastructure, why are they pro building the wall? It
Well,
kind of doesn't make sense to me.
one of the things that conservatives do believe the government has a direct responsibility for is national security. That's a key. That's a key. Stay out of everything else, but heck yeah, you better make sure the national security is tight. And when you combine that with the perception that immigrants directly cause rapid social change, the thing conservative, whether it's me, old school conservative, or American conservatives, the one thing that is definitely throughout, rapid social change makes you nervous. So if I can use national security to then limit immigration as a source of that social change, we're on point. And I need to be clear, that has always been a consistent track of conservatives. Even back when the Democrats were the conservative party, America has always had an issue with immigration when it was coming from Ireland, then when it was coming from Italy, now when it's coming from Latin America. Those sources of immigration, early on we needed the labor, so we just, okay, as long as the Irish stay in Boston, we're good, whatever, but we need them to work the docks. That was the trade-off. But as our economy expanded and we didn't need immigration as much, America developed what's called nativism, or basically the idea that Native Americanism needs to be protected from other threatening cultures, especially when they bring things in like socialism. Okay. And that's a real threat in American history. So that's where you get, it seems like that kind of, no, it's not strange for conservatives to want to build a wall. It's actually absolutely in line with what you would understand to be their ideology. So now I'm going to show you a picture of a rare and mysterious thing in America called the moderate. The moderate has disappeared from American politics. And I say that because when I was growing up, and again, I think a couple of you are not my age necessarily, but at least closer to my age than 18-year-old freshman. When I was growing up, and you guys are going to laugh at this, the Democrats and Republicans didn't matter in an election. It didn't matter. You knew the Democrats were going to vote Democrat. You knew the Republicans were going to vote Republican. The people that mattered the most in elections in the 1990s and 1980s were the moderates, what were called at the time the undecideds. We're talking about 20, 30% of the American electorate up until the week before elections would still put themselves in polls as moderates, as I want to see. And so ironically, both the Democrats and the Republicans, like one thing, the 2016 election, 2020 election, Trump's message was to his supporters. Republican messages were to Republicans. Democrat messages were to Democrats. They were trying to, we all remember the term, rally the base. We got to get election turnout. It's us versus them. In 1980s, the messages from both Democrats and Republicans were to the moderates. How do I convince that 20% of undecided voters to vote for my guy? If there is one transformation that Trump had, and I didn't even necessarily put it on Trump, I actually think Obama and specifically the Tea Party reactions to Obama and earlier administrations, I think that's where we start to see this kind of pick a side approach. And we could talk a long time about why exactly that happened. But I think the symbol of that change has got to be Trump versus Hillary Clinton. That if you said you were undecided a week before that election, it didn't matter if it was a Trump supporter or a Hillary supporter. They both looked at you like you was crazy. How could we be if you can't make up your mind about one of these two people a week before the election? I'm done with you. I'm just wasting my money and my political megaphone. You need to find something else. And so, listen, it's not a coincidence that the 2020 election had the lowest polling for undecideds in the last 30 years of an election. The lowest number of people right before an election that still said they were undecided. In the 2020 election, just about everybody, I'm talking 90% of Americans knew exactly who they were voting for months before the vote happened. The moderate has disappeared from American politics. And part of the reason is the moderate is more concerned about compromise. They are willing to agree with issues with liberals and conservatives. Does anybody know? I I actually consider myself to be a moderate because to me, I try and wait and figure out how I can fall into the middle, how I can ultimately bring stuff together. Because I don't necessarily see either side as being absolutely right or wrong. To me, it's about how can we find a middle ground to be America. And I've had people flat laugh in my face when I say that. Race, economics, the environment. How can we find a middle ground? Man, just pick a side. You guys know what I'm talking about? Is this ringing a bell with anybody?
I find myself to be in the middle a lot of times too.
But here's the question. Do you then find yourself isolated or set to the side because you're the one in the middle? Do you see what I'm saying? Like you
Yeah.
can't even get in the debate because the debate is an either or, man. You know what I mean? It's a knife getting thrown back and forth between two people. Last thing you want to do is be in the middle trying to catch it. I don't know. What are other people's thoughts? What do you guys think? Am I already over my skis or what?
No, I agree, because there's things, that you agree with on one side, but you don't on the other, and then you get to another topic and you agree on that, and I mean, shoot, I don't think anybody could agree on anything like the past two elections.
But and see now here's the argument. I would argue, Courtney, that both of us know multiple people where the very notion of not having every one of your opinions on this box is ridiculous. Like the idea that you could dislike Trump and still vote for him. Me and my brother-in-law, for the record, my brother-in-law is as red gets. He wasn't a MAGA hat wearer, but he was very conservative. I mean, me and him tussled a little bit at times. Towards the end, he came to not like Trump predominantly because he thought, I always thought this was funny. He thought Trump was a blowhard. He actually agreed with many of Trump's policies, but the way he would say it is, yeah, you know what, I'm going to vote for the guy, but I'd never invite him to my house for dinner. That was his approach. And I found myself being one of those people on the left going, well, if you don't like him and you think he's a bad man, then how can you support him? And his argument was, well, again, personal policy. And he's doing the policies I like. That's the end of it. And so even as I'm teaching this to you, I have to admit that I have fallen into those boxes. You either hate Trump or love Trump. How can you not like him and still support his policies? That makes no sense. It makes perfect sense if you understand the difference between the ideology and things like public opinion. Does this make sense? Questions so far?
Does.
Any questions, guys? Shoot, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
Oh no, it's okay. But I would kind of agree, like I'm kind of in the same boat as your brother-in-law is like I don't think that Trump is a great person per se. Like he doesn't maybe have the best people skills, but like his policies I think seem pretty fair and reasonable. But I am that person that, is in the middle, and then at some points I just think that I just kind of compromise It's just like, well, I'm not gonna get anywhere either way, so I'm just gonna go this way. I think that's what a lot of people do is like, well, what's the point in fighting it when I can just agree and it'll be easier?
Yeah, I mean, Courtney mentioned it earlier. A lot of this stuff comes back to that idea, that fundamental question: why do we even vote, right? I mean, if you start to put all this stuff together, first I have my ideology, and then I start to have my ideology impacted by other people's impressions of public opinion. Then I have to translate my ideology plus public opinion into an actual vote, and now I have to understand whether or not the vote's going to have. I get it, man. I get. Here you go. Full disclosure. I didn't really start regularly voting until I was probably in my late 30s. You know, if I happen to be off that day from the restaurant, okay, yeah, I'll go vote. But if I had a shift, yeah, I'm not going out of my way. I know I got to work at 4, and it wasn't driving me. I didn't feel connected. I was trying to survive. And I think a lot of Americans find themselves in that position, and they'd love to have their vote make a difference, and they pull the lever and the light goes on. But the reality is, I think for most Americans, the lever they're looking to pull is that weekly paycheck. And so as long as that's happening, well, I'll let the big wigs take care of it. And so what do you end up doing? You end up relying on things like mass media to tell you what's going on, right? Because you don't have that bandwidth. You worked all day in the factory or in the restaurant. And so in the end, you got to hope that they're giving you something real. But again, they're a business. So mass media, in the end, it's got some functions. What are the functions? What are they supposed to be doing? So first and foremost, the most fundamental function of the news is to inform us straight what happened. Okay. The news does that. All of the news services do that. Now, the question is, are they informing you of everything that happened? Are they picking and choosing the events? But fundamentally, all news sources, the first function is to just tell us what happened. You all with me? The second function of the news is investigation. Investigation, in other words, if informing us is based upon the things that everybody knows happened, but maybe they weren't all there, investigating is about telling us about the things we didn't know happened. Going into the food factory to investigate poor sanitation, following around a public official to find out that he's actually taking bribes, or that's the investigative component of the news. Now, again, where's the bias come in? What they choose to investigate. For whether, no matter which news site you like, Fox News has a very distinct system for determining what they investigate as part of a news service. CNN has their own structure. MSNBC has their own structure. And so that's why, even though they're all giving you the news, you will have very different understandings of what that news is. I used to, so again, how do I do the news? I will start with CNN. I'll read an article. I will then look that same article up on Fox News. I will then look that same topic up on BBC. That's when I start to feel like I've got a full understanding of what really happened. Is everybody following me so far? Here's the dilemma. There have been more than a few times that I didn't find that article on all three. Fox News ran something that CNN didn't. CNN has an investigative report that Fox News, it wasn't even a thing. And then BBC has a whole different take, like, man, I didn't even know that happened in America, because neither news service put that out there. Listen, not for nothing, if you only watch American news, there's nothing ever happens in Africa. Nothing. There's never anything that happens in America. There's never any news to report from Africa. Except if you go to the BBC and then you realize, wow, there's lots of stuff going on in Africa. My news sources just don't report it. So that's how they also promote a bias. Now, here's the bottom line, and here's where I think most Americans have their fundamental problem with the mass media interpretation. The reality is, before the Vietnam War, the American news service was not supposed to interpret the news. The primary goal or purpose of the news prior to the Vietnam War was to simply inform and investigate relative to American understandings of the issues. The reason things changed was because during the Vietnam War, it became more and more apparent that the government was lying to the American people about the war. Flat lying, making stuff up. And so all of a sudden, the news is put in a position where they have to start to reinterpret what's happening based upon their own perspectives and not what they're being told by the government. And the more the governments would say something like, everything's going well in Vietnam, we're winning the war. And then the next night, Walter Cronkite would go on and go, we're losing the war. That was when the American media broke with the government in terms of, now we're going to start interpreting this, even if it hurts your feelings. And not for nothing, that's why Richard Nixon ultimately started spying on various people within the mass media, because now the government no longer trusted the media. And so you still see those two threads down through America today. But the key here is that the function of the news, what the news is supposed to do for us, they're supposed to inform us of what's happening, investigate those things that we don't know is happening, and interpret the events in a way that we can easily digest. The interpretation is why Fox News people hate CNN. It's why CNN watchers hate Fox News. It's why everybody hates MSNBC, because that interpretive component is when they start bringing in political ideologies when they're just supposed to be informing or investigating. Questions? I'm throwing a lot at you guys. Is this making sense so far? Any questions? All right. So now, kind of last big lesson here, but it shouldn't take too long. I'm going to dive deeper into this issue of the mass media. Specifically, I'm going to give you 3 theoretical models that you can use to consider what you think about the mass media. Now, remember the words I just said, theoretical models. These are just philosophical arguments, understandings of what causes or what the impact of the mass media is. This is not truth. It's just a theory. These are 3 different ways to look at the impact of the mass media. The first model is called the propaganda model. The propaganda model essentially says mass media has an enormous impact on public opinion. Again, the primary argument of the propaganda model begins with the assumption that the mass media has an enormous impact on public opinion, to the point that if you're a real hardcore supporter of the propaganda model, you're one of those folks that believes the mass media is literally brainwashing America. Anybody know those people?
Yes.
Like, just, and again, I need to be clear, you can absolutely find people who support the propaganda model on both sides of the political spectrum, right and left. This is not a conservative or a liberal thing. There are a lot of Americans who think the mass media is brainwashing America. Why? First, because most mass media is owned by enormous corporations. Did you guys know that the Radio 1 network controls about 40% of all the radio stations in the United States? One company. Thousands of radio stations. What does that mean? That means every station follows whatever programming guidelines that company has. Liberal, conservative, religious, non-religious, whatever it is, all 5,000 of their stations are going to follow that line. That's an enormous amount of influence. Enormous. 2, one of the big issues with the media, at least people's perspectives on the media, is how can you be objective if everything you do is driven by profit? How can you be objective if ultimately your bottom line is not actually telling the truth or telling me everything that happened, but making money off of what you tell me happened? Anybody ever wonder why it seems like every other news story is some great travesty, or you know, the wildfires? Everything seems to be, it's always about, like, what's the word? the biggest news. It's got to be this big, hard hitting, get you your eyes to bulge kind of news story. Well, because the regular day to day stuff don't sell. We're gonna watch, you know, next Director Watson's Day. You know what I mean? Ain't nobody tuning in for that show. Nobody cares what I did all day. That's just not story. Now, if I suddenly got lit on fire and was running down Main Street in Jeff City, guess what? It's on the news. Oh my God, Professor burns up. That's news. And the argument is because we're based upon this profit model, only the flaming professors running down Jefferson City are going to get on the news. Only those great, big, flamboyant stories. And so that alone is what then conditions the average American to think that all news is like that. 3, reliance on quote unquote trusted sources. Long story short, what really bothers a lot of people about the news is the idea of the confidential source. Does anybody know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Right? I don't have to, if I work for a paper, I am legally protected. I do not have to divulge where I got sources. Now, I can be taken to court, and Trump is really, he's done this quite a bit. He'll take you to court, and then what might happen is the judge behind doors might ask you to, all right, so what's your source? But even then, you can refuse. There are reporters who have gone to jail rather than give up their sources, and more often than not, they end up getting released before they ever give up their sources. Why is that an issue? Because a lot of people don't trust things they don't know, trust things they can't see. What do you mean? Oh man, this played out during the Trump administration. Trump got really angry with what seemed to be leaks from his own office, news stories that were being printed that only could have come from inside the White House office. So that's why I don't know if you guys have followed this all. His Department of Justice actually secretly investigated New York Times reporters, Washington Post reporters, got frankly illegal documents from the DOJ to then get into all their emails, and ironically, right, same thing was happening during the Obama administration with regards to the use of some of the Patriot Act regulations. And so again, this is not a political ideology issue. This is about how much do people trust or not trust the media, because how much of the influence does the media have? And Trump knew he needed the media on board. So any media that wasn't on board with him was a threat, and that was just the truth of it. The ability of financially or politically privileged actors to provide flack, negative responses to critical media coverage. Long story short, this is what we were talking about back with LeBron. That the propaganda model suggests that there are individuals who have way, way too much influence on our daily lives because of their relationship with the media. And you'll forgive me, the one that jumps to my mind, Kim Kardashian and Kanye West, what the heck were they doing in the Oval Office? I'm sorry, but those are the moments I'm just like, okay, these are the spokesmen for American society. And if you're a big Kanye West, Kim Kardashian fan, then I guess you're just gonna have to email the dean and let him know how much I suck. I'll make sure and read the paper. Anyway, for me, I just couldn't believe that moment. I'm like, of all the people that have been working their whole lives to try and advocate for, the unfairly incarcerated or fighting against discrimination in the legal system, Kanye West and Kim Kardashian are the ones that get to the top of the mountain. Really? Did anybody see that? Kanye West in the White House?
Yeah.
Listen, when even Trump had that embarrassed, oh my God, is he almost done? Like, does anybody remember that? Like, even Trump was like, how did this guy get in here again? Like, Trump thought he'd be able to use this propaganda model to really influence public opinion. And ultimately, I think Trump got trumped by people who really know how to use that social media, Kim Kardashian and Kanye West. It was almost a weird circus of mass media and politics coming together in the Oval Office. I don't know. That was a crazy look. That, and when he stood in front of the whole table of like McDonald's stuff saying, let's eat. Those sorts of moments, just like, where are we? Like, woo, like Twilight Zone stuff. But that's the stuff that whether you're on the left or the right, you look at those sort of pictures like, how is this the news? How is this the news? Why are we talking about this? Does anybody go ahead?
I was kind of embarrassed that they were even able to like, be at that position. I was kind of like, this is what America's getting to, where we're going to be led by these people. Like these
Yeah,
people make an impression.
Man, yeah. I tell you, I got my own feelings about Trump, and I've been clear about that. But how did they get in there? Like, and you know how
Yeah.
they got in there? Because they're super rich, and because if you're a propaganda guy, you look at them as everybody running around on YouTube taking pictures of themselves, the Eiffel Tower, calling themselves influencers. They all desperately, desperately, desperately wish they were Kim Kardashian or Kanye West. I mean, that's next level influencer when you can quite literally just post, hey, this is a good lollipop, and sales of that lollipop go up 1,000% because you're the one eating it. That's influence. That would, from the propaganda perspective, be proof positive of what the media is doing to us. Then we
I think
flip
it,
the page. Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
it's okay. I think it kind of goes back to what we were saying about who influences the public opinion and how you wanted to kind of include the famous people
Yep.
into the public officials, because whether it was Trump or someone else's idea to bring them in, so many people were against Trump that maybe if you brought in these people who have an even higher influence, they're able to kind of push that opinion even further.
Yeah. I
And
mean,
force it upon them.
it's fascinating. I find it fascinating because, again, remember, it didn't just influence public opinion one way, right? Obviously, I was kind of put off as there were more than a few people who saw that as a watershed change with regards to how the policies were enacted and whatever old jokes and whatever. Here's the truth of it: they got Trump to use his pardon power on certain individuals that were ultimately put into jail unfairly. And so, as much as I might be making fun of it, the reality is the model said what happened is what the model said would happen. They'd had enormous influence to the point that they were actually able to change the actual policy. So, the other argument here is all the way on the other side, the minimal effects model. Minimal effects model. As the name suggests, this theory says the media has little to no effect on public opinion. Little to no effect on public opinion. And I know what you're all thinking off the top. How is this even possible? We all know that is definitely not the model. Or do we? Because here's the thing. What if I argued that your political ideology is set before you ever turn on your first news broadcast? The way you're raised, going to church or not, your color of your skin, your gender, all of these things have played a role so that when you start engaging mass media, you only engage the mass media sources that align with what you already believe. How can I argue mass media is affecting public opinion when in fact it's reflecting public opinion? They're not telling us what to think. They're showing us what we think. How do I know that? Because if Fox News does not show conservative ideology, they lose viewers. How do I know that? It's happening right now. If anybody was paying attention, Fox News, after the election, Fox News was actually the first news service to give the election to Biden. Did you guys know that? Like, Trump lost his skull. That's why he started really hating on Fox News, because they were actually the first one. And then they took it back down because neither of the other news stations would also call it for him. And he just laid into Fox News. Is anybody aware that there's a new kind of more conservative online, I want to say it's American News Network or something like that. It's a more conservative news service that's really gained steam in the last 6 to 12 months, to the point that they're actually being seen as taking away viewers um, from Fox News. And the argument is because in the end, Fox News for about a month actually tried to pivot back towards a more moderate position. There were people within Fox News that once Trump lost, it was pretty clear, at least in their minds, that the value of Trump supporters as a critical part of their news feed would no longer be there. There was no more reason to keep with the MAGA messaging and blah, blah, blah. They were wrong. The Trump support is an enormous factor in this country, which means it's still an enormous factor for the bottom line of conservative news agencies. And so for about a month and a half, Fox shot themselves in the foot. They were Fox News was willing to put out things like, well, let's talk about what happened on the Capitol. Let's talk about the role of, and then people really started questioning their conservative chops. And this new news place, and again, forgive me for not knowing the name of it specifically. I want to say it's American News Network, but they went from like 20,000 viewers to like 2.5 million in weeks. And they were all former Fox News reporters. And so that would align directly with the minimal effects model. It is not that the news media tells us what to think. They reflect what we think, because if they don't, they lose money. They're not brainwashing us. It's a mirror. They're just reflecting what we already think. What do you guys think of that argument?
I think that's an interesting perspective to come from, because in some opinions, like even in the propaganda, it definitely feels like they have a really big impact on what opinions we choose to go after. But then from this perspective, it allows us to kind of see how they're almost even staying in business by choosing the opinions that are already popular and kind of going with them.
Not for nothing, but the brainwashing approach doesn't have to be founded on that, almost on that original founding fathers belief that we're all stupid, uneducated, and emotional. How is it that we could be brainwashed unless we're so dull-witted that we want to be brainwashed? That's one of the core assumptions of the propaganda model. Not that the mass media is brainwashing us, but we can be brainwashed. Does that make sense? It's really kind of cutting the average American short to argue we're all brainwashed just because we turned on the TV. The other part of this is, go ahead, please.
I think it's more so that people choose to not think for themselves. Less than like brainwashing. I'd say that people don't necessarily put the research behind the information they are getting, so they don't know if it's true or not. So it's like you're the sheep or the herder, and everybody is sheep, and we're just following as the news says.
Yeah, no, that's a good way. That's a good way to separate. So what if I said it this way? Brainwashing is the idea that even though Sarah thought A, I have been able to work my magic and swirly hypnotics, and now I've got her believing B. That's brainwashing. I suppose a better word relative to the propaganda model would be indoctrination. And I say that based upon what you were saying, Samantha, it's this idea that maybe their effect is because we just don't know anything. Not that they're brainwashing us from A to B, but they're the only source of information we have, so we just assume that's what it is and we get brought in. Part of that, we're not looking for more information and deeper into it. And again, it's in many ways, I find it fascinating because what we tend to forget in this country is when we throw out these absolutes, we often tend to forget the deeper meaning and impact and, frankly, long-term results of that assumption and what it means for Americans and what we're saying about groups of people. Like that's why, for instance, I'm adamant about improving the relationship between law enforcement and the African American community, precisely because I'm such a law and order guy. And so at the same time, whether it is people within the law enforcement community who I have definitely heard have even borderline discriminatory kind of understandings of the community they're in, I don't like that, right? Because of the racism and whatever. But I also don't like the idea that we paint the police with a broad brush. And so, in many ways, I think this all comes around to understanding how we understand, how we connect on these issues and then move forward. Again, my moderate voice coming out to try and find a middle ground, And if we assume we're being brainwashed, then all we're doing is limiting responsibility. I'm not responsible for the dumb stuff that came out of my head. I was brainwashed by Fox. I was brainwashed by CNN. That's a cop out. That's a cop out. Take responsibility for your perspectives. And if you don't know what your perspectives are, do some work to figure it out. That'd be That's my soapbox moment. You had your hand up. Somebody had their hand up. I'm sorry, I was talking way too long.
Yeah, I did. I just was over here doing my own little research about like the news stations, and I was just wondering if you were talking about the One America
I think
network.
that's it. Yep, that's it. One America, and again, they're from what I understand. I have not done my research myself, but from the articles I've read, they are the distilled conservatism from Fox News, to the point that they've been implicated in some of the vaccine, all these different issues. Anyway, they've gained significantly in the wake of Fox News changing their approach, or at least for that moment. Fox News is now back on board and doing their thing, and that's why their viewership's gone back up. Not because they're brainwashing people, in my opinion, but because they're offering what the people want to hear. That's the argument. So here's the middle ground. And whoever made up this name, it is the worst name for a theoretical model in the history of theoretical model names. The not so minimal effects model. That's a cop out and a half, but you know what? It is what it is. The not so minimal effects model is the middle of the road theory. They do not agree with the propaganda model that says we're all being brainwashed. But they also don't agree that the mass media is just a pure reflection, and all of the agency is, we're still complete control of our own opinions, our own perspectives. It's just the media does what we tell them to do. They fall in the middle. They say the media does have an impact, but it's somewhere in between the limited I choose what I want to watch and the brainwash approach. So what is that in between? How do they still impact? And this is kind of what I was referring to earlier. First, agenda setting. The ability of the media to pick which stories they put out is a significant impact on public opinion. I'll say it again. Agenda setting is the argument that the media's ability to pick which stories are put out is a significant impact on public opinion. That should be straight ahead. If two of the news sources choose to run the State of the Union speech, but the third one doesn't, that will significantly impact how public opinion develops across all three of those viewer groups. One group is going to think it didn't even happen. If they did, they're going to assume it must not be too important because, well, my favorite news station didn't follow it. So agenda setting. So again, to put this more generally, it's not always a matter of how they paint the picture. Sometimes it comes down to basically whether or not they show you the picture at all. That can be a powerful source of affecting public opinion. Questions? Okay, so 2 is called priming. Priming is the idea of using the media to directly affect public decisions. So it's not quite interpreting. It's almost like you're turning the news into public service announcements. And I think everyone will understand what I mean when I say, I think a good example of this is how all of these news stations are reporting on COVID. Whether it is anti or pro vaccine, whether it's we're in the middle of the nuclear COVID or COVID's no big deal, it's the degree to which the media is using the news story to create public opinion that says, yeah, they're not brainwashing us, but they sure as heck have an influence on how we see the news, how we develop our public opinion. Is everybody making sense so far?
Yeah.
So the third one is called framing. And this is the one that comes down to, okay, how actually are you presenting the news story to me? How are you framing the issue? Framing, in my mind, there are things that we All right, what if I told you that two of the most important things for us determining how important a news story is how early in the broadcast it takes place and the news stories that come before and after it. Does that make sense? What they
Yeah.
right? If it's the lead story, well, gosh, it's got to be important. If they waited until the last 5 minutes, okay. You ever notice? I don't know if anybody here watches CNN. CNN has a habit. The last 5 minutes of their news hour is the feel good story. They always have this feel good story, some little blurb, somebody did good in the community, whatever it is, but it's always the last 5 minutes. It's always struck me the idea, let's get all the big things out of the way. Let's get all the scary things out. Here's a cute little story about a kid that the fire trucks came on his birthday. See you in 5 minutes. Like, to me, that's framing. You're telling me that there's a layer, that there's differences in the value of these news stories. How about the news story? Here's a good one framing. Stay tuned after the break when we talk about Professor Watson is an idiot. Oh man, let me go run and get to the bathroom, get to the refrigerator, because this is gonna be good. That's framing. That's framing. And regardless of how they report it, the language they use when they're reporting it, the pictures, that framing can impact how the story affects our public opinion. Questions so far?
Do you think that has kind of like they do the framing to have like an emotional role or like pull on their viewership, and then they're able to plug in whatever information they want their viewers to believe?
Yeah, well, see, and again, that last part is,
Or believe, or just verify that they believe themselves.
here's the bottom line. They're going to program whatever is going to get the most people to watch because their advertising dollars are dependent upon their viewership. That's the bottom line. That's it. And if they are not producing what the people want to see, then they aren't going to be successful. Now, do they manipulate public opinion with how they frame it, when they put it in the news service, whether or not they even choose to have it in that hour's news reporting? Absolutely. But in the end, I feel about the news media the same way I feel about politicians. I do not blame politicians for the garbage that takes place in Washington, D.C. I blame the voters. Why? The voters are the ones that picked the politicians. We don't pick people to go to Washington, D.C. to make a better America, to work together to fix the roads, to work together to address the vaccine and COVID. We pick politicians for one purpose only, to get what I want done in America. And then Courtney does it, and Sarah does it, and Alita does it, and our four guys show up in Washington, D.C. with swords and shields, and we are shocked that it's like Gladiator 2, The Return of Russell Crowe. But that's exactly what we sent them there for, to fight for me. We even use that exact language. My politician fights for me. That's what got Trump elected. That's what got Biden elected, is that the people that voted for him think he's going to fight for me. We have no conception of American politicians actually going to work for a better America. In fact, I don't know we'd elect that person. Because what if a better America doesn't match up with what I want? And on that note, any questions, issues? Maybe it's me, but I see a lot of looks on your faces. Y'all gonna be thinking about this stuff a little bit more for a while.
Yeah, I think you just kind of gave different perspectives. Sorry, but made me think about a lot of the aspects of the media and the role of the propaganda and all that in a different way.
And I hope actually I hope that the discussion also explained the foundation of some of the comments I gave to you guys on papers. I will be honest with you guys. Another reason why it took me so long to grade is because I really, really thought about the comments. I really put a lot of time into the comments because Many of you had extremely strong opinions on issues, opinions that frankly I felt were really far right and really far left on that political spectrum. And so it was so important to me to not, I did not want to in any way touch on your political ideologies. That is not my job. I needed to try and figure out how to put comments out there that would then help you shape your political ideologies and public opinion into a better framework for presentation. And so I hope that comes through. I hope that came through. Um, yeah, I mean, like I said in the weekly thing, I mean, there was at least 4 or 5 papers that all of a sudden abortion was a main topic, and I've said all along there are only 2 topics in 23 years of teaching. There are only 2 topics I have never had a lesson on in politics: abortion and the death penalty. I don't touch those with 10-foot poles, man. That man, I could throw everything in the sun, every book, every you're gonna believe what you're gonna believe, and that's just it. So it's not my job. But do I need you to understand what it means to support your evidence on how you feel on abortion issue? Do you know the history? Do you know the good sources versus the bad? Do you when I teach debate, this is how I teach debate. I don't want you to learn your position. You already know your position. You want to win a debate, you have to know the other person's position better than they know it themselves. And that means research and evidence. And it also is the explanation why so many people absolutely hate having these sorts of conversations with me, because that's where I start. I go straight. I go straight to the Trump website, to the Republican National Committee, and I go straight to the Constitution and read the Second Amendment, and then I read the court cases that have had to do it. I drill down to it. Man, I've studied the Civil War and slavery and racism and the origins of European society. I've studied it all the way back. The great book I'm doing Great Societies on Audible book. I do the great courses in history, and so I'm doing ancient civilizations. I just spent 3 weeks learning about Chinese ancient civilizations. You know, it's just yeah. Anyway, just know what you know, that there's always more you can do to understand your positions, to be able to defend them, to be able to promote them. Every one of you, your opinions and perspectives are not just important, they are essential to our society. I believe that every one of you matters. I believe every vote matters. But it's just convincing ourselves of that truth. And the only way that happens is if we open our eyes and our ears and take a little bit more time to look around. So, with that, I close this lecture. Questions?
Yes, as far as the quiz.
Shoot.
Here's Courtney.
Oh, man, she keeps us all on track. Y'all need to send her like some chocolates or something, because she's always tapping out that at that end. Yeah, that was great.
I was waiting
1, 2,
for her
3,
to be
kid.
like, okay, I got my pen ready, Courtney.
Hey, it's business. I'm hitting the road tomorrow. I don't got time. I can knock it all out.
Yo, would you believe that this is actually my time off? This is me relaxing. You know, this is the first time in like 4 days I haven't had to wear a tie for 14 hours. So yeah, I'm with you, man. I'm with you. What can I do, Courtney? What's your first shot?
To figure out what's going to be on what we should focus on for the quiz.
Focus on for the quiz. See, yeah, man, I got 12 emails just during this class. Man, don't these people know it's my day off? All right. What to do for this week's quiz? Ooh. Give me a second. I'm just logging into Canvas here to look up the class. Where am I? Here we go. And guys, I forgot to put it in this weekly update, but I really need to ask a personal favor, especially since this is my last class that I could be teaching for a long time. Please make sure you go in and do the evaluations. They're the only way that my people know the job I do, what you're getting out of the class. They're the only way I know how I can improve the class. So I need you to know this isn't just numbers or some vanity thing. I honestly look at every comment. If there's suggestions for improving the course, I literally take them into account when I design the next version. So if you could just take a moment in Canvas and go through the evaluation, I would really appreciate it from both a personal and professional level. So that's my pitch there. Week 7 quiz, politics, public opinion, and the media. All right. So, got to know what public opinion is very clearly. Got to know how public opinion is shaped. Talked about the things that help us, that lead to us developing public opinion. You need to remember the difference between mass media and news media is the reach, right? Talked about that reach thing and the idea that yeah, that if you're talking about mass media, it's got to be more than just your local news. It's a broad distribution of news events. It's a broad ability to really talk about everything that's going on. So again, you don't want to include things like blogs and social media. That's not mass media. Okay. Make sure you, there's two questions on crash course video number 33. Video number 33 has two questions. Oh, what do you know? Video number 44 also has two questions. So video 33, video 44, know the definition of public opinion, know the inputs to public opinion, and know the difference between mass media and news media. Bibbity bappity boop. Now, go ahead, Courtney.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you.
Problem. See, no one caught the bibbity babbity boop video. Let's see. I'm so old.
Sorry.
No, it's just I was trying to explain to my students the other day everything from, just communication patterns when I was young, and I mean, the idea that I actually look forward to reading the paper back in the day, because if you didn't catch the 5 or 6 o'clock news, you didn't get news. But the days before CNN, it was the 5 o'clock news and the paper, and that was it. That was it. That was your only source of news.
Did they have as much pull or effect?
Well, you could make it two ways. Because in the one sense, you could argue the news had less of an effect at a national level because, well, when I say the paper, I'm talking about my hometown paper, right? Maybe the New York Times. And so local news becomes so much more important. Local things going on. You might not know something about the big national picture for days, right? I used to have to wait. If it was a late baseball game on Sunday night, you didn't get the scores in the paper until Tuesday because the scores didn't happen until after the newspaper went to print. So, I mean, it sounds silly, but yeah, you waited 2 days for even something like the score. You know what I mean? Now, at the same time, you can make an argument that because it was so much more condensed, that it did matter more. Not for nothing, you made the paper back in the day. That you was living large, man. That was the YouTube influencer. Hey, I was on the newspaper. Your parents would cut it out. They would put it in a scrapbook, and I mean, it was a big deal. Right now, it's yeah, I was in the paper. Guess what? My YouTube video got 50,000 hits yesterday. It's a different world, So I don't know. I think the impact of the media is actually relatively the same. I just think it's gotten bigger. The way it impacts us, the things that it does to us as a society or public opinion. I think those are all kind of. I mean, people forget, man. You want to go back to even the days of Hamilton and when it's Jefferson versus Hamilton and the play and man, they were using the newspapers to kill each other. I mean, everything was interpretation then. I mean, that whole paper, when they outed Thomas Jefferson and his affair with Sally Hemings, and the fact that he was sleeping with a slave, oh my God, that newspaper made the rounds. And then one of his friends put out a completely opposite one in a different paper, and that one made the rounds. So, yeah, this is going all the way back to the founding fathers, people. Any other questions, issues? Okay,
I have a question. So
go ahead, shoot, Samantha.
So next week, do we have an online class? I wasn't here for like the first 5 minutes.
No problem. So we're gonna do next week. It's gonna kind of be a summary, final exam review, basically any and all questions, that sort of thing. if that
And
makes
is that on
sense.
Friday or Saturday or both days?
It's going to be same bat time, same bat channel. Next Friday, you know what? Before I speak out of turn, I'm guys, I'm so busy right now. It's actually, you know what, Courtney, once again, you save us. I'm going to be in Kansas City for the entire day next Friday. So I will do, you know what? I'm just going to do it while I'm at work. Give me a second so I can make sure and switch my calendar around to make sure that I have this. Okay. I'll put this as we, I do the last week's update. So I'll put it in the update, but just so you all know now, I will have our last class / review session / summary next Thursday morning, 9 to 11. Thursday, July 29th, 9 to 11. That's going to be that extra session. And that will be our last session.
One more time, that's Thursday.
Thursday,
July 29th from 9
would
to
that be
11.
recorded?
Yes, I always record them and post them.
Okay, because I cannot make it to that class. So.
Yeah, I'm actually going to be in the office. I'm just going to go ahead and shut the door and I'll Zoom from the office and we'll go from there. And again, it's one of those things that I can't say enough how much I appreciate your guys' patience with the schedule. And I tell you, this was going to be my smoothest class of the summer when I first started. I had everything laid out. Schedule's going to be perfect. And it just blew up. But everything's holding together, and I'm actually continuing to just really enjoy these conversations. I really enjoy talking to you guys. And I honestly look at the way that we engage these things, and having read your papers, knowing how radically different many of our opinions and issues are on these topics. I almost wish I could put this out there for no other reason to show that we can all talk about this crap without putting our hands around each other's throats. You know what I mean? We can fundamentally disagree on everything from guns to Trump to religion to drugs to whatever, race. I mean, the big ones, and still laugh a little bit and have some fun and be honest and open with each other. And yeah, to me, that if I have any impact on you folks, it's maybe just giving another half second to a second to listen to somebody that maybe you wouldn't have listened to before. And if that's the only impact I have, then I think that's a good one. Sarah, go ahead.
Okay, so when are final grades going to be posted? Because according to the schedule, like the university academic calendar, it says Monday the 2nd.
I will do my best.
Okay.
I cannot promise you that I'm going to get every paper. So
Right.
Here's the thing.
I know you're busy.
Well, it's just, okay, here's the truth of it. I need to get the grades done. They probably want them by Monday because, well, why would they ever think that I would give the final on the last day of the week? My problem is this: I want to get all that done, but considering how much work that I know some of you are going to end up putting in that final paper, I feel like I need to sit down and read them just like I read the other ones and offer some comments. Right. And you know what I mean? And so that's going to take time. So I will absolutely start Monday, but I might not get done until Tuesday. You might not get final grades posted until Tuesday or Wednesday at the latest, but I promise you it won't be a week.
Sounds good. Just want to kind of get a estimate there.
Yep. And so, yeah, let me just look, because then of course everything starts kind of going on Monday. Yeah, the scary thing is now I'm going to have to sit down at some point and put in the welcome week schedule of events. So let me put it another way, not for nothing, Sarah, but I got to have it done as soon as possible, because then I got 12, 14-hour days starting on Thursday. Yeah. So it might not be Tuesday morning, but if I was betting, it'll be done by Tuesday, end of business.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much.
Go ahead.
Would it be helpful if we got in our papers ahead of schedule so then you can have more time to grade them and such?
Well, if you're an overachiever like that, you go and let me put this another way. I can't promise I'm going to get to them early. And I say that because let me look at the schedule again. I'm sorry, guys. Okay, so like for instance, I'm going to be completely out of the loop all day next Friday. I'll either be on the road or I'll be in the meetings in Kansas City. And so even if you got it in, I can't, I can't promise that I'm going to get any grading done next Friday. I could probably get some papers graded on Saturday. I don't want to put you in a position where you feel like you have to turn it early, but if it's there when I happen to look at it, then heck yeah, I'll grade it. I know that was a big, long-winded professor type answer to a question that could have been answered very shortly. I know. Other questions, issues?
When will the final be open?
The final will open at 12:01 Thursday morning. So
Okay.
right after midnight, Wednesday, Thursday, and then it closes 11:59 Sunday night. Why do I
Okay.
say that like that? If you started it for some reason at 11:30 on Sunday night, it will shut off automatically at that half-hour mark. You won't get your full 2 hours. You guys got tons of time to do this final exam. Okay. I'm sorry, 2 hours for an online exam. You guys should nail it. Most of you nailed the midterm. You should nail the final. And that's my very PC way of saying, put some work into the essays. The essay should be just knock me out of the water. You got an hour plus and just do the essay. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
Speaking of the essay, real quick, how long are you wanting these? Because I did a long one for the midterm, but I don't know if I should have did too much or I should have done more.
No, you didn't have to. You didn't have to go. How do I put this? If you're stopping at a paragraph, you're probably not writing me enough. If you're starting on your fourth paragraph, fifth paragraph, you might be giving me too much.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, I want the complete answer, but I don't want you to feel like you need to give me a page just on Washington's wooden teeth. You know what I mean? You just highlight the key points. And to me, the key is, can you connect? And this is the absolute bottom line. Can you connect these key concepts? Can you put the French and Indian War and then the Revolutionary War and the Articles of Confederation and then the Constitution and explain to me why those things even make sense together? Now that's a good answer.
Awesome. Thank you.
Folks, you have a great weekend. I am looking forward to playing a round of golf tomorrow, which I haven't done in 2 years. Hope I remember how.